I'll let him make his case, but I'm going to share with you tonight the contrasts that exist between him and me. And those contrasts span issues dealing with the economy, with water for our community, with health care, with education, with Social Security, with the standing of the United States around the world, with education, with immigration. There are significant differences between my view and my vision and what my opponent, Congressman Vera, has tried to implement, and I want to share that with you. And the premise that I operate under is that leadership matters. Whoever sits in this chair, whoever is occupying this office representing the interests of the people who live in this district, they need to be able to understand how this action affects the entire universe and the entire spectrum. My view is that we need to change course. We need to find a way to grow this economy so it creates jobs for our young people and everybody else, that allows them to establish themselves once they get out of high school or college, and then allows them to increase their standard of living over a lifetime of work. We need to find a way to address our shortage in water. Instead of releasing water out of Folsom Dam day after day after day, we need to put the interests of people who actually live in this area above the interests of, say, some of the critters or creatures down the river.
Baseball.
We need to find a way to hold that water for us.
And I'm recording this.
We need to specifically address the flaws and failures in the Affordable Care Act that will strip, as it's currently written, will strip $700 billion from Medicare over the next 10 years. My parents, my dad's 90, my mom's 89. They structured their affairs to have Medicare as a safety net in the event they had catastrophic health issues, and to first pass legislation and then defend that same legislation that strips $700 billion over the next 10 years from Medicare is bad policy. And that is a major difference between myself and Congressman Vera. On foreign affairs, I have articulated a vision where the United States speaks up and defends its national interests across the world, not in an abrasive or an abusive or a militaristic fashion, but in a clear, consistent, no-nonsense fashion that allows our allies and those who might someday be our allies to understand what the United States is all about. Now, finally, before we go to questions, and again, for those of you who have questions, if you'll push star 3 on your keypad, you'll be able to get in the queue to ask questions of me, and nothing's off the table. You're welcome to ask anything you like, but again, star 3 puts you in the queue to do that. Finally, I want to share with you a couple things that I think need to be immediately addressed as it relates to our country. I think we need to reduce taxes and ease the regulatory burden in order to get this country's economy back up on its feet. I'm so tired of Wall Street getting all the attention from our elected representatives when it's Main Street that makes the economy work. We need to refocus on Main Street. We need to bring the attention here in Sacramento rather than kowtowing to Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, and all the traditional Washington, D.C. based special interests. We need to cut spending at the federal level and reduce government waste. When I talk to my daughters who are 22 and 20, and I say to them, you understand that when you put on debt, ultimately it can drag you down if you don't deal with it. And they both say, we've watched you your entire life, Dad. We understand. Now go to Washington and make that happen. So I pledge to you that that's one of my goals, to reduce spending and eliminate government waste. Reduce the debt that we're piling on to the federal balance sheet that's going to drag us under. Third, we also need to take a look at the Affordable Care Act, because there are clearly places where it is not working. You know, the president said that we could keep our doctors. That's not true. The president said that health care would be less expensive. That's proven untrue. The president said that it would benefit our seniors. That's not true. There's a litany of such instances embedded in the Affordable Care Act that need to be addressed. I say this respectfully but accurately. Congressman Barra has refused to address those. I intend to do so. And finally, we need budget reform at the federal level. We need to find a way where we can have a clear, professional discussion.
Will you please put that down? You're making me nervous.
Our budget, so that we don't end up every year with this gridlock and shutdowns. I mean, that is so irresponsible, in my opinion. Now, finally, in Sacramento, in California as a whole, we need to find a solution to our water crisis. Now, again, I'm almost finished here, so be patient.
Blanco.
If you have a question, push *3 to get in the queue to ask your question. On this water crisis, we've known since Governor Brown the First, who served from 1958 to 1966, that we had a distinct need for water storage facilities in this state. And we have studied over the last 50 years where we could build new facilities to store water. What we need to do is now stop studying it and get on with building it. I'm pleased to see what the state legislature did recently in terms of approving a water bond that'll be in front of the voters in November that provides around $2.8 billion in funding for that. But we've got to address this issue. This is bread and butter. This is the difference between being able to sustain ourselves here in this state over the long run or having the parade to other states of businesses and families continue. So with that, let me finish talking here and then we'll get to questions. I think leadership matters. I really do. Every successful enterprise I've ever studied, including countries, it all comes down to leadership. That's what I offer. I'm going to articulate a clear vision of no-nonsense leadership that takes the good ideas regardless of source and tries to implement them. I want to thank you for participating tonight. Jason is our moderator. We're going to go to questions now. And along the way, I'm going to ask the listeners here to participate in 2 telephone questions of mine, but we're going to get some questions from the listening audience, participating audience first. So, Jason, what's our first question?
Hi, Kurt from Folsom. You're on with Doug Ozy.
Kurt? Are you there?
Mr. Ozy, or Congressman Ozy? Yes, hello?
Kurt, hey, how are you?
Good evening. Good evening, yes. I'm a citizen of Folsom, and I've got a question for you. High-speed rail has been a proposal for the state of California, and it could be very good for Sacramento in terms of connecting us to other metropolitan areas. What's your position on the project and federal funding for that?
On the high-speed rail, for those of you who don't know it, who aren't familiar with it, that's a proposal to link the San Francisco Bay Area to Los Angeles by virtue of one of these high-speed rail lines going down the valley. Estimated cost, what would you say, Kurt? $40 or $50 billion? Anyway, $40 to $50 billion. I have come out opposing that largely on financial reasons. And my thinking is as follows. The cost of this piece of infrastructure far outweighs the benefit. In fact, if you took the
pitcher for the Giants
on $40 or $50 billion at say 5%, you could literally buy everybody who wanted one an airplane ticket on Southwest from the Bay Area to Los Angeles for the entire year. And you wouldn't have to build, and you probably have money left over. I have yet to understand the economic rationale that argues in favor of high-speed rail. I don't see how it benefits the larger needs of this state in terms of finding an economical way to move people and product around our state. If there's evidence to the contrary, I'm happy to consider it. But at this point, I'm not in favor of federal funding for the high-speed rail project. So, Jason, let's go to the next one. Next question.
Jim from Fair Oaks. You're on with Doug Ogie.
Jim?
Yes, I'm here.
Well, good evening. How are you?
Hello. Well, I'm fine. Thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
Well, we have the American River. It flows right through your district, and a lot of us really care about the American River. And I've heard you say on the radio, and then today, we have to hold the water back. And I'm really concerned about the conflict, or the apparent conflict, between holding the water back, which means even more reduced flows, and the flows are going to go down a lot more than they are now, and the problems we have with our fish and other things that are important to us.
Well, Jim, you have accurately recalled what I have said. If you go back to the first part of this year, you'll see that the Bureau of Reclamation was releasing around 500 to 600 cubic feet a second out of Folsom and Natomas. The purpose being they saw a drought coming. Finally, they recognized the problem. Now, what Jim is talking about is that as the flows in the river go up or down, the habitat along the river is affected. And in particular, if you reduce flows too far, then when you get the anadromous fish, the salmon, that come into the bay and then up the Sacramento and then up the American to spawn on the gravel beds, if you reduce the flows too far, you end up exposing the gravel beds in which the fish lay their eggs, and the eggs dry and then they die. The difficulty is that in a drought situation like this, you have to make some choices between frankly, releasing, say, 1,500 cubic feet a second versus 500 cubic feet a second. And if you release 1,500 cubic feet a second in June, July, August, September, that means when you get to October and November, before the rains come, you're going to end up short water for human consumption. And it's a very difficult question with how to deal with it. What I have articulated in this campaign, what I have said in this campaign is we need to make sure that there's enough water in Folsom Dam, which, by the way, is the source for surface water, that's drinking water. It comes out of the taps in your houses and irrigates your lawn and fills your pool and what have you. We need to make sure that we have enough water in Folsom to get us through to the next rainy season. And if we don't, we need to reduce the outflows out of Folsom to protect that water. And I know that a member of Congress can impact that, because when I was in Congress before and we had situations where we needed to flush something or we needed to hold up on releases for the Red Bluff Diversion Dam or what have you, a member of Congress can weigh in and, using the influence of their office, can prevail on the agencies after a careful analysis of the science and find alternative ways for meeting the needs for environmental purposes. My view has always been that we are going to take care of humans first. The Endangered Species Act is flexible enough to allow for that, and we need to utilize it accordingly. There are times in nature when drought is the situation that arises, and absent, for instance, the dams that we have right now, we wouldn't have any water flowing down the river, because it would have already gone out to sea. Now, I'm sensitive to the environmental needs, but we have huge human needs that need to be met also. And I'm going to place a priority on those. So, now, there's a couple of things I want to ask you.
This is what they asked.
I'd like to ask you, those of you listening on this call, and it allows you to use your telephone keypad to answer. The question I'd like to ask you today, right now, is do you have a favorable or unfavorable view of the performance of Congress? So if you have a favorable view of the performance of Congress on your telephone keypad, I'd like you to press the number 1. If you have an unfavorable view of Congress, I'd like you to press the number 2. And if you're undecided on this question, I'd like you to press the number 3. So we're gonna give you about 15 or 20 seconds, and then we'll go to the next question. So Jason, get that queued up. Just give me another couple seconds to let folks respond. Okay, so Jason, let's go to the next question.
Your response has been registered.
All right, Jeanette Keller, you're on with Doug Oki.
Hello, yes, I wanted to know what you plan to do about Southern California taking Northern California's water. We need it here, and they're taking it.
So
And I wondered what your plan was for that.
my plan is that we're going to increase the supply of water available to folks north of the Delta so that we can meet our human, our agricultural, and our environmental needs. And then to the extent that there is water left over, we're going to share it with our neighbors to the south. We're not going to let them come in here and strip our water rights. We're not going to let them come in here and change area of origin law or current California water law so that we end up being another Owens Valley. I just think that is a terrible, terrible idea. I have dealt with it when I was in office before because I will tell you, as you've properly surmised, the appetite in Southern California for taking our water is huge. They are a voracious water consumer. And if we don't stand up strongly, if our representatives cannot figure out that our water needs to be used here first and are able to defend that position, then our water will go south. Now, I happen to think these twin pipes that Governor Brown has proposed are a plan, part of a larger plan to move Northern California water to Southern California without letting us use it first. I think that's bad policy, and I have argued against any federal funding for the twin pipes, what I call the pipe dreams of Governor Brown. I have more than a passing knowledge about water law in this state, having had to deal with it for 6 years while I was in office and 10 years since I left office. I've served on water boards that are right in the middle of those debates since I left office at the end of '04, and I look forward to representing this area and defending our water rights in the days ahead. I think this is a great question, Jeanette. I mean, this strikes right to the heart is you got to take care of your home first, and then you can worry about helping your neighbors down by the Tehachapi's. So, great question. So, Jason, let's go to the next question.
All right, I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question you'd like to ask Doug, please press *3. We'll get you in the queue. With that being said, the next question we're going to go to is Ann in Fair Oaks. Ann, you're on with Doug.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, Ann.
I've been listening to the ads on TV from your opponent, and he's accused you of benefiting financially from your office. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to reply to those charges.
So the ads are a complete misrepresentation. The chart, I deny everything included in that ad. The fact of the matter is I'm an entrepreneur and a small business owner who the day after I graduated from college started pouring concrete. I've been successful. I've helped others achieve economic success, and I'm a true believer in the American dream. There are examples around this community that you can see where I have put my talents to work, and the community is the better for it. As far as the allegations in the ad, I don't belong to any country clubs. I don't have a second home. I drive a 12-year-old GMC truck that I use in my everyday businesses. I've seen the ads too, and frankly, I chuckled over it. I don't know what else to tell you other than the truth. I just told you the truth. So, I work hard. I know how to work. I know how to make things happen. And over a long career, it pays off. I appreciate the question. The Sacramento Bee today characterized the ads as a misrepresentation. Actually, I think they said they used the word untrue, which I appreciated. And the Sacramento Bee, frankly, has never been a really big fan of mine. So if they're calling it untrue, you can imagine how I feel about it. So, again, everybody listening, if you have a question for me, and there's no questions off limits, you can push *3 on your phone to get in the queue to ask a question. We're going to stay at this for probably till about 8 o'clock. So anybody who has such a question is certainly welcome to push *3 and pose the question, and I'd be happy to answer it. So, Jason, let's go to the next question.
All right, next caller is Margaret. You're on with Doug Oti.
Good evening, Doug.
Hi, Margaret.
I know you are a great fan of young people and support them in so many ways. You demonstrate it all the time. My concern is about the disproportionate interest rates that our students are having to pay for their student loans.
Yes.
And this is such an important issue because in getting an education, of course, they're wanting to improve the quality of their lives and their contribution to the community and society and their families. And at a time when federally funded loans to banks approach 0%, students are having to take out loans at 7 and even 9%. And Elizabeth Warren has now introduced a bill that would put boundaries on the interest rates that can be charged students for loans. I'm wondering, is this a bipartisan issue that you can put your weight behind? And if you would not join in support of her bill, what leadership would you take to address this issue?
Okay, so I have not read Senator Warren's bill, so I don't know the details of it.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, I have a daughter who's in school in Tennessee at college, and I have another one who's going to Davis this fall. So I am plugged in on this issue in particular. I happen to think that, as you've accurately pointed out, when the Obama administration is having the Federal Reserve bail out Wall Street at 25 basis points on the loans, and then they're forcing our young people to pay 7 or 8 or 9% on loans to finance their education, there's something fundamentally wrong with that. The fact of the matter is that our economic demand, if you actually go back to what happened in 2008, 2009, the people who were in charge of the large corporate America that reside on Wall Street did not properly take care of their enterprises. They drove them over the cliff. They turned to the U.S. Treasury to bail them out, and you and I got stuck with the bill. And the consequence of the fact that we had to bail out Wall Street under the Obama administration, and in part under the Bush administration, the fact that we had to bail them out meant that we didn't have enough reserves or capital to help the young people of this country pay for the education that they, frankly, so desperately want to achieve. The young people I know, what they want is they want to look up the chronological ladder and they want to find people who have spent the last 15 or 20 or 30 years, meaning their parents' generation, and have been successful at creating an enterprise, and they want to model, they want to replicate. The young people want to replicate those successful people. That's called the American dream. They want to end up owning their house. They want to find a spouse and raise a family. They want to have a great standard of living. And it all starts with education. And my dad was the only one of his siblings who went to college. My mom was one of 9. All 9 of them went to college. Every one of my sisters and I went to college. My children are in college. We have got to find a way to make college education affordable. And while we're on this subject, I want to bring up something I read this past week, which was an announcement by the UC system here in California that they were going to increase the compensation paid to chancellors at specific universities within the system by 20%. And that the next step in their consideration, this was by the regents of the UC system, the next step was that they were going to then take a look at the salaries paid to the professors and the adjunct professors and the support staff and raise them also. 2 months ago, I don't know if you saw this, but 2 months ago, the UC system announced that they were going to increase their marketing efforts to foreign students and students from outside California in order to try to address their financial problems in terms of revenue expense. I mean, listen closely. They want to increase their marketing to students from foreign countries or for students outside California. The flip side of that same coin is they're going to let fewer California kids into the UC system. And it's driven solely by a demand for higher tuition payments. That's what they're saying. They're afraid to say it in those words, but that's the facts. And I, as a lifelong Californian, someone who was born and raised in Sacramento and lives here today and attended UC Berkeley and graduated in 4 years, to have the administrators of that system tell California parents that their kids have to get second in line or to wait because they can't run their financial affairs at the UC system properly is unacceptable to me. Now, that's a broader answer, Margaret, than you asked about interest rates. Interest rates is part of this question of making university education affordable. But we also have to look at whether or not we're going to allow UC regents to tell the vast number of California parents that their kids aren't good enough for their school. That is unacceptable. California taxpayers created the UC system. And if I have anything to do with it, we're going to go back to the days when a UC education was affordable and available to the kids who otherwise academically merited getting into that system. And along the way, Margaret, we're going to find a solution on this student loan stuff too. So thank you for that call. Again, I'm sorry, that was a long answer because this is just so close to so many families that I can't help but spend a little time on it. I want to remind everybody, *3 is the way you get in the queue to ask a question. I have a question for you regarding my opponent, Congressman Bera. I would appreciate feedback from you as to whether or not you think he has become part of the Do-Nothing Congress. And I'm sorry to phrase it that way, but that's the way I look at Congress today, is they have done nothing. If you think he's part of the Do-Nothing Congress, I want you to press 1 for yes. If you think he's not been a part of the Do-Nothing Congress, I want you to press 2 for no. And if you're undecided, I'd like you to press 3. This is based on
your response has been registered.
Sir, I'm just looking for some feedback. So we're going to wait another 5 or 10 seconds, and then Jason will go to the next question accordingly here in just a moment. Okay, so let's go to the next question, Jason.
All right, Sharon, you're on with Doug Osee.
Hello, Mr. Osee. It is Sharon Perry calling, and I'd like to address the Social Security issue that has often been referred to as an entitlement. Working, tax-paying people who support the government have paid into Social Security and are now concerned that it will be bankrupt before it becomes available to them, or those currently receiving Social Security and depending upon that, are highly concerned of its future. What are your thoughts and plan to work with this issue?
Social Security, this is a great question. I mean, remember the brief discussion we had about Medicare a few minutes ago? To a very great degree, Medicare and Social Security work in tandem to provide older Americans a safety net under which they can enjoy their retirement years. It's not, a gold-plated retirement plan, but it does provide the ability to make sure that you can buy food and you can get medical care when you need it and what have you. When I was in office before, and what I hope to do again, is build on the success that Social Security has proven to be for older Americans by giving every American additional opportunities to take additional income and set it aside for their retirement downstream. One of the great things about Americans is that if you give them a chance to save money, they will take advantage, and that's a good thing. So my view is we have to not privatize Social Security. That's a bad idea. We need to not increase the eligibility age, which, by the way, my opponent, Congressman Barra, supports increasing the eligibility age. We need to not cut benefits for current beneficiaries or for disabled persons who get SSI, which, by the way, my opponent has voted in favor of. What we need to do is protect Social Security and Medicare and then give Americans additional opportunities that they can set aside dollars for their retirement over a lifetime's career so that when they reach retirement age, they have sufficient resources to support themselves in the standard of living that they choose. I mean, the fact of the matter is Social Security presently pays 1.2% as an annual return to the beneficiaries. All right, so we trade return for the security of having that safety net. What we need to do, like I say, is protect Social Security, not privatize it, and then give individual Americans like you and me additional opportunities to go out and provide for their own retirement. Take extra dollars and set them aside in an IRA or a 401k or a 403b or any of those other cafeteria plans that exist. I think that's the heart of individual reward and accountability in my mind. Government says, okay, here's an opportunity for you. We're going to protect Social Security, and if you want to make sure that you have even more, 40 years from now or 30 years from now or 20 years from now, then you're free to set aside additional income in tax-free accounts. I advocated for that when I was there before, and I look forward to doing that again, because I think that's the true long-term solution for many of the retirement issues that face our country. All right, Sharon, that's a great question. It's just a great question. So I thank you for asking that. Again, if you have a question, push *3 on your phone to get in the queue. Talk about any issue that you may wish to ask me about, from the economy to immigration to foreign affairs to ISIS or ISIL or whatever the president wants to call it this week. Happy to take those questions. I look forward to them. Jason, what's the next question?
Max, you're on with Doug Osee.
Max?
Yes.
How are you?
Good. I was going to ask you about Social Security, but the previous caller kind of answered that for me. But you were in office before, and as far as I'm concerned, you didn't do anything. You voted with Bush to start the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was totally against that war because it was based on lies. And I want to know, you keep saying you're fed up with the way Congress is running. Since you had experience in there before, what are you going to do to fix this? All the problems.
So, Max, let's take the problems one by one. You're right. I was in Congress after September 11th, and I did authorize the president to track down the people who killed over 3,000 Americans and bring them to justice.
Okay, we all know that was a lie.
Well, no, what happened in New York was not a lie. What happened in Washington?
Oh, I know that was real, but that was the government that did that.
Well, no, I don't think the U.S. government flew those planes into those towers.
No,
or into the pen.
they were drones.
No, drones don't carry people. Remember, there are a whole bunch of people on those planes that went into the towers and into the Pentagon and crashed out in Pennsylvania. So I don't know of any drones that carry passengers. So I don't subscribe to your theory here that there were drones that flew into those towers or into the Pentagon or into the field in Pennsylvania. I will tell you, under the same set of circumstances, where an organization, state-based or not state-based, comes to this country and perpetrates the murder of over 3,000 Americans, I am not going to turn the other cheek and say that's okay, because that's not okay. Now, there was a very, very broad bipartisan vote authorizing the president to take action. Pelosi voted for it. I voted for it. Clinton voted for it. I mean, this was not Bush. This was a broad bipartisan vote. Maxine Waters voted for it. In fact, every member of Congress on the critical vote, except for Barbara Lee from Oakland, voted in favor of authorizing the president to move forward. So I don't know where you're getting your facts, but I was on the floor when the vote took place, and while I admired Barbara for taking that stand that she took, I disagreed with her in terms of turning the other cheek. Now, in terms of, I think your implication here is that, or at least the attempted implication here is that I vote with the party. Actually, that's not the case. I was as critical of Bush as I was of Clinton when he did something wrong. And I can guarantee you that I don't care who's in office. If they do something foolish, I'm going to hold them accountable. And if they have a good idea, I'm going to support implementing it. So the fact of the matter is that it's a dynamic process. And you got to be on your toes. You have to read an enormous amount. You have to understand how one event affects another, or how a different situation in, say, the border in Mexico affects employment in Iowa. I mean, you can't. This is not something you learn from a book. This is a lifetimes of experience in the economy that allows me to figure out, this is the best answer. And sometimes you don't have a good answer. Sometimes you're picking between bad and worse. And maybe that's not the way it should be, but that is the way it is. So I appreciate your view, Max. I do not subscribe to the idea that drones flew into the Twin Towers or into the Pentagon or into that field in Pennsylvania. And given the same set of circumstances, with the same degree of knowledge, I and virtually everybody else in Congress would vote the same way. So, again, I thank you for the question. We respectfully disagree. So, Jason, let's move on to the next question.
Mark, you're on with Doug Osie.
Hello, Doug. How you doing?
Great, Mark. How are you?
Good. Apologize for the speakerphone, but my battery in my walk-around phone died. So
I've had that problem. So,
well, first thing I just want to, suggestion number one, when it comes to the Medicare or medical Obamacare, I'll have a question for you on that. But just to let you know that there's been, for what I do for a living, which is high-tech crime and fraud, there's been an increase in medical fraud generally across the board. And it seems like only New Jersey has addressed it correctly, where they actually require insurance agencies, whether they're profit or non-profit, to have an investigator for every 60,000 insured. And it might be something to look at for the future, to require that nationwide.
Okay, so one investigator per 60,000 subscribers?
Right, and they actually bring back, it pays for it like 10 times over.
Okay. So you recover quite a bit then, okay.
Yeah, so the big question I have for you is this. What kind of lipstick are you going to put on this pig called Obamacare? Because you state you want to get rid of it or fix it, and it's not working. So what's your proposal to fix it?
All right, so let's first talk about what's proven proving to be good policy within Obamacare. Okay? Because there are a couple good things in there. Number one, Obamacare has brought to the front and center of the debate the fact that we need an insurance system that allows us to cover pre-existing conditions. I think that's good policy, and you can account for that in your pricing if you know that it's something that the public would need. And if the public doesn't want it, then they ask for some alternative that doesn't cover pre-existing conditions. So that's one of the things that I think is important. The second thing I think is important, especially in an economy performing as poorly as this one is parents and kids have an interesting relationship. For instance, my relationship with my children is very good, but in terms of anticipating what they might need, I'm a lot more skilled at figuring out, you need insurance, and you need to get a job, and you need to put gas in your car, and that kind of thing. Well, the ability in this kind of an economy for parents to keep kids on their health insurance programs until they're 26 has proven to be a pretty good idea. I think the Democrats stumbled into it. I don't think they did it on purpose, but in large part, you got to give them credit, even if it's accidentally, that has proven in an economy as difficult as this one is to be a good thing, because I know most kids under 30 think they're invulnerable, but the fact of the matter is they aren't. There's a certain percent that get sick or injured or what have you. They need health insurance, and the ability to be able to get coverage through their parents has proven to be a viable program, especially in this economy. Now, beyond that, speaking of lipstick, I think we need to change the Affordable Care Act, certain provisions of it. For instance, the Affordable Care Act as adopted on a strictly partisan vote in 2010 strips $716 billion from Medicare over the next 10 years. Now, I don't know about you, but my parents are still alive. I have a lot of their friends who rely on Medicare as a means of providing health insurance. Stripping $716 billion from Medicare at the precise time when the baby boom is starting to enter into Social Security and Medicare eligibility timeframes or chronological timeframes is a significant policy error and needs to be reversed. All right? I think, in addition, I think we need to find a way where individuals can opt out of the Affordable Care Act if they think they can get a better program somewhere else. Right now, Congress has refused to provide a delay in the individual mandate. They've given a delay to Wall Street. Congress has exempted themselves from being subject to the Affordable Care Act. But the regular Americans who work on Main Street and down the street from where you and I live have not been given the same opportunities as Wall Street and members of Congress. And just before we leave this point, my opponent, Congressman Barra, has voted to give Wall Street the exemption and to protect the exemption for members of Congress and their families, but he has refused to vote to give individuals like you and me the same exemption. So I think that's an area that needs to be addressed. I could go on. I think we need to find a way where Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, I know the President put that, but I'm trying to be respectful, where the Affordable Care Act does not turn into a job killer, where everybody's employer cuts their hours to just under 30 hours a week. I think we need to find a way where the health care is available, where it's less expensive. Remember when the Democrats passed this, the President said we could keep our doctors and that health care would be less expensive. Neither of those have proven to be true. If you're lucky, you get to keep your doctor, but your premiums, both in terms of the deductible, the copay, and the deductibles, have risen for vast numbers of Americans. So the manner in which it was sold to the American public is not the manner in which it has actually been implemented, and that needs to change. So those are a couple of the examples, Mark, of where I think we need to go, and I'm determined to get to it. I mean, you just can't stick your head in the sand and say everything's great, because it is not great. There are problems with this legislation that need to be fixed. I intend to try to fix them. Congressman Barra has chosen to not try to fix them. That's his record. I've seen it in his votes. So, again, Mark, I want to thank you for that question. Those of you who have questions, if you'll push star 3 on your telephone keypad, we'll get you in the queue and we'll get your question answered. We're going to do this until 8 o'clock, so we're going to have 3 or 4 more questions. So, Jason, do you have any more? Do you have the next question?
All right, we're going to go on to the next question, and that is going to be Austin. You're on the phone with Doug Osee.
Yes.
Austin?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Osee.
How are you?
Good, thank you. I was involved a lot in working in the last presidential election, volunteering my time, and so because of that, I've decided to write for a large high school project about voter fraud. And so my question to you is, to what extent did voter fraud affect the 2012 presidential election, and what measures do you believe can be implemented in the future to combat future voter fraud?
I don't know to what extent voter fraud impacted the outcome of the 2012 presidential election. I have not studied that issue. I am hopeful that the Secretary of State's office is on top of that, because I do think the sanctity of the ballot box is one of the fundamental principles in our democracy that we rely on. I'm reluctant to comment further because I just don't know a lot about the issue, Austin.
Okay.
So I do recognize and respect and appreciate the sanctity of the ballot box, but the issue of voter fraud in the 2012 election, I'm sorry, I have not studied that issue, and I'm very careful about offering comments about stuff that I'm not familiar with.
Right.
So I appreciate your question. So,
do you have an opinion on like voter ID, for example?
Well, which proposal? I mean, I know there are different voter ID proposals around the country. Some have been effective, some have been implemented, some have been thrown out by the courts. Again, I rely on the Secretary of State in this issue, again, because, voting is a state-based activity, and it's governed by state law, and I'm running for a federal office. So, again, it's a reluctance on my part until I've studied the issue to comment on that. So, I appreciate the question, though. So, Jason, we're going to have to move on to the next question.
All right. Next question is going to go to Monica. You're on with Doug Osee. Monica from Carmichael.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us and our concerns. I appreciate that. My question to you, first of all, I'd like to say your answers have been spot on tonight, and with the exception, well, not the exception of your answer, but the exception of Max, you handled that very well.
Why don't we get to your question? Let's focus on your question.
Okay. My question is the concerns that we have about immigration and the illegal status of people who are, for instance, able to get driver's licenses and become attorneys when they're not even here legally. That's been an increasing problem. It's a financial strain on our economy. And I would like to know your feelings and what your proposals are to rein that in.
Okay, great question. I actually think that our immigration system is broken. I think we have been lax in insisting that potential immigrants who want to come virtually every other current or historical society around the world, is that every time an issue comes up in the United States, we always go back to what has been the statutory legislation, what's the case law, and then over time we've created a very good body of law that allows us to handle our affairs with respect towards everybody's rights. In the situation with immigration, whether it be illegal or otherwise, let's deal with legal immigration first. I am a supporter of legal immigration. I always have been. Our country today grants new citizenship on a year after year after year basis to about 1 million new citizens each year. People who've come to this country, gone through the process, consistent with our laws, and after a period of time have been deemed eligible for citizenship and have taken the oath of citizenship and have been granted citizenship. I'm a strong supporter of legal immigration. The fact of the matter is my great-grandfather came here from Norway, and he went through that process. I'm sure there are many people on this line today whose family have similar experience. That system, which uses our laws to come to a conclusion, is working fine. It's the overwhelming number of people who are here illegally that is overburdening the system to a very great degree. So let's go through a series of issues, sub-issues, if you will, as it relates to immigration. First, do we have a right to control who comes into our country? The answer, in my view, is we have an absolute right to control who comes into our country and who we decline to allow into our country. So we get to control our borders, and we need to do so. In 1986, the Congress, under then-President Reagan and O'Neill worked out a deal. Tip O'Neill was the speaker from Massachusetts. Anyway, Reagan and O'Neill worked out a deal called the 1986 Immigration Reform Act that allowed this problem to be untangled. Now, unfortunately, at that time, there were around 3 million people who were here illegally. The fact of the matter is that in Washington, some parties don't live up to their end of the bargain. And as time passed, that part of the bargain that was advocated for by Speaker O'Neill got implemented, and that part of the bargain that was advocated by then-President Reagan didn't get implemented. So basically half the deal got done. And many of the people who were junior members of Congress at the time that this deal was struck are now senior members of the Democratic leadership and have no credibility in my mind in terms of coming to the bargaining table and figuring out a solution. I'm very skeptical of whether or not they are reliable negotiating partners. Now, how do you deal with 11 or 12 million people here? Let me give you my experience. And this is going to sound silly, but it's true. You got to do it one case at a time. When I was first elected in 1998, in January of 1999, one of the first issues that hit my desk was the fact that we had a 2,000 case backlog of immigration cases in the West Sacramento office of the Immigration Service. What we did was we figured out what the problem was, which was management over there was not making timely decisions. I went to the Immigration Service Commissioner and I said, listen, let's change the manager. Let's get somebody in here who can make decisions, and let's get this stuff done. And lo and behold, at the end of my second year, that 2,000 case backlog had been eliminated, down to zero. The woman's name who came into the office to handle the management, the senior management position, was Susan Curda, C-U-R-D-A. What we need to find are more Susan Curdas who know the law, are prepared to make a decision, and will implement that decision accordingly. Now, in terms of people getting driver's license, that's a state act. I know that the federal government apparently has approved California's issuance of driver's license to people who are not here, who are here illegally. Illegal I don't understand the facts behind that yet. I just saw that here last week, and I am trying to get up to speed on it. It makes me uncomfortable to have one branch of government acting to grant rights and privileges to people who are here illegally, and that's a problem, and we need to work through that, and I'm looking forward to doing that. I don't know. I mean, Monica, I think this is a great question. It strikes right at who we are. I am not anti-immigrant. I am actually in favor of immigration, but it has to comply with our laws, and we have to secure the border. So I thank you for that question. I know we're over time at this point. It's a little bit after 8 o'clock. Jason, maybe if we could take one more question, and then we'll wrap up.
All right, we got one last question then coming from... Can you hear me? We got one last question that's coming from Davey.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. It's actually Davey, but who's counting? I wanted to ask about the immigration question too. That young lady before me kind of asked some of the question, but I'm a little bit more focused on one thing, and that's that the members of Congress. What would you, as a member of Congress, do if the president decides to void congressional law and venture off on his own and write immigration law and not enforce the laws, or what the basics that he's doing at this point? What would you, as a congressman, do, if anything, to counteract that?
So your question has to do with the potential executive action that the executive order the president might issue either on the deferred action for child applicants or some other broader executive order exempting individuals who are here illegally from being subject to our laws.
He's already done that. That part he's
Correct.
done. Now I'm saying, what would you do about it if you're in a congressional position?
I actually think politics here is actually working the way it's supposed to work. The president has held, in my opinion, the president has held off doing anything further in terms of issuing an executive order that would instruct the Justice Department or ICE to not enforce our laws because of the potential political consequences in November to a bunch of Democratic candidates around the country. I have every expectation that once that election is over, that the president is going to move forward issuing some executive order that will undermine, for lack of a better word, current law and throw the whole immigration system topsy-turvy. I think that's a major mistake, not only for policy reasons, but also just because that's not the way we do things in America. I mean, the president is not the dictator. He has to work with Congress. So your question specifically is, what would I, as a member of Congress, do if the president attempted to rewrite by executive order current immigration law? And fortunately, there exists in our institutions a variety of checks and balances that allow Congress or the courts to intervene when the president goes too far. For instance, the courts can invalidate such an executive order and force the enforcement of the law. Congress can essentially put strings on any funding to implement the president's executive order. And I really hope the president doesn't go down this path because it is extremely adversarial. It's inconsistent with the traditions of Democrat and Republican administrations dating back to day one. And while I know that every president needs flexibility, I think purposefully inflaming tensions as high as they are as it relates to immigration is a policy mistake and will complicate our ability to get to an appropriate solution in a timely fashion. I do think the possibility exists for good people on both sides to come to the table and hammer something out. But I am hopeful that the president does not make the mistake that I think he's considering of issuing some executive order that will unnecessarily inflame tension on both sides of this issue. I mean, that's my view. So I appreciate the question, Davi. So it's a little bit after 8 o'clock. I want to thank everybody who has stayed on the line to listen. I want to encourage you to participate in the process. You can go to my website at dougoc.com and check out, my views on different issues there. We're going to be out in the district, maybe in your neighborhood, walking precincts. If you'd like to talk to me directly, you can always call the campaign office at 903-7093. The young people who are walking precincts for me, they have the ability to take direct input from you, and that input comes back to our office, and I read it in terms of the issues that are important to you and the like. Long story short, I know we all wish for and hope for and are working for a better America. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity of working with each of you to make that happen. I thank you for your time tonight. I look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail. Have a good evening. Good night.
Town Hall Connect has ended.
Hi, this is Doug Ossie. Thank you so much for joining me on the telephone town hall tonight. If you have any remaining questions or comments for me, please leave them after the tone along with your name and email address, and we will get back to you. Again, thanks for joining me. This is Doug Ossie, candidate for the United States House of Representatives. I hope to see you soon.